women leaders. We're so delighted. You know, the pandemic has been tough on a lot of us, and we've missed that rubbing of shoulders and handshaking and hugging. Thank you. So it is wonderful to welcome you here this evening, and Women Lead Oakland. The League of Women Voters is looking for ways that we can have cross-sector conversations, not about just complaining, showing up and complaining, but welcoming different perspectives and trying to power through to get to creative solutions. This is why we have convened today. We invited 4 different perspectives. One of our guests, unfortunately, fell ill this morning and was unable to join us, and that's Christina Livingston, Executive Director, Statewide Executive Director for ACCE. I'm sorry she's not here to join us, but I'm so delighted that we have these fabulous guests. And Evie Batey is our moderator this evening. You'll look at the, I'm not going to read the resumes that are little bios that are in there. She's just darn smart, okay? In every single way, and just a very big talent as a journalist. And I think she will work hard to see us, get us through this objective that we've set for ourselves. Thank you so much. Welcome. Evie, I take it away.
Oh. I'm concerned you've oversold me, so. Well, so thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you all for coming tonight. I was afraid that I would be speaking to an empty room given how nasty the weather is. So congratulate yourselves for actually wedging yourselves off the couch and out of the house tonight. You should be very proud. So let's dive straight in. As I know, because I did read your resumes, all of you have really remarkable life stories. You should write your memoirs when you're done here tonight, and if nothing else, I would watch the Lifetime movie adaptation of those memoirs. So what I would like to start with is what would be the act break in the first act of that Lifetime movie. What I'm wondering is, was there a moment in your life when there was like a switch that like flipped in your head and you realized you needed to dedicate your life to leadership? If so, what was that moment? And Madam President, I'd like to start with you. I think there's a mic here for you. I refuse to give up my mic.
We don't have to share, it's okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dyana Delfin Polk. I am the president of the Peralta Community College District Board of Trustees. It's a very long title that does not always fit on a business card, so it gets interesting. I'd say the moment, so the moment that comes to mind, actually we just talked about this on our board not too long ago, was what made us decide to run for the Peralta Community College District Board of Trustees. And the story that I told was being inspired by my younger brother who went through the Peralta system and had no one else to really talk to about that. And he said, you know, this is a system that needs help. You know, education system here is so great. We have so much potential, but we need good leadership to be able to carry that forward. And so I'm always inspired by him. And so he went through the Peralta system. He went to Merritt College and is now in the U.S. Air Force serving our country. And so he got his start here in Oakland, here at Peralta. And so he continues to be the inspiration as to why I ran for office.
And Mayor Thao, what about you?
In a nutshell, I mean, there was so many moments in my life. As a daughter of refugees growing up, I've always been an advocator, right? I've advocated for my parents who didn't know how to speak English. But at the same time, my parents are illiterate as well. Because, you see, the Hmong language was only developed around, the 1950s by missionaries. And so everything was told through tales and stories. And so imagine a world where you don't speak the language, you don't read any languages. I think you need new batteries. Well, that's why we have a backup. Hello, yes. And so, so I've always been a huge advocate to my parents. And then after leaving and living I was born and raised in Stockton, but I came out here and I've been out here and lived out here for my whole adult life. And so wound up in a domestic violence relationship, 6 months pregnant, and he's still beating me. And so I leave because, not for myself, but I truly leave because of my unborn child. I didn't want him to have to go through that. And so with that being said, we were unhoused, 20 years old, very embarrassed of the situation that I got myself into. I felt like I was alone, that I was in a unique situation, which obviously is not the case. And so with that being said, there were just so many of these life experiences that I have gone through that now in hindsight, I know that they are not unique, that so many people go through these situations. And so I dedicate my life to public service because I've always known that there could be a better way, and there should be a better way. And government plays a huge part of that role, and I'm a huge advocate of bringing services to the community so that no one else ever feels so alone to the point where they are hopeless. Because I was in that dark space too at one point where I was hopeless. And it's very dangerous. When you're hopeless, you'll do things that may change your trajectory of your life in a really bad way. And so I enrolled at Merritt College, and through the inspiration and help of many of the instructors, I graduated valedictorian from Merritt College, and I went over to UC Berkeley. And so, it's almost the same drumbeat, but for a different cause at each point in my life. And I can tell you that through all of those different phases in my life, there was a moment in time where I fell in love with myself. And I think that that's incredibly important, to say, this is who I am, I accept me, I love me, and I'm unapologetic about it. And so that's a message that I want to deliver to our young people.
Now, down at the end
Great.
here, we have Barbara Leslie. She's our Oakland Chamber. Yes. I beg your pardon? Sure. Okay. So Barbara, you had sort of a different journey to the Oakland Chamber. So can you tell us a little bit about how that switch flipped for you?
Sure. Is it okay if I sit or stand? Can people see me in the back? Okay, great. I'm going to stand. Thank you. Again, I'm Barb Leslie. I'm the president and CEO of the Oakland Metro Chamber. I have been there for about 9 years, been in Oakland for about 30, actually. And we'll get to that because that's sort of the genesis of, I think, the conversation or the question you're asking. I'm also on the Oakland Port Commission and president of the Port Commission this year. It is a little humbling for me to be in this room right now because there are so many women that I have grown up in Oakland in this room with. When I first went to Mayor Elihu Harris's office and did an internship when I was in graduate school, Viola was working in that office. I worked for Brooke. Gilda was in that office later. I mean, it's a little intimidating. I want to make sure we really, any one of them actually could be sitting up here, and frankly, everybody should just pass around the microphone with the wisdom that's really in this room. So I want to really acknowledge that and thank everybody for being here. And my journey was a little bit different. I think for me, it was more about getting to the mayor's office. I had graduated from college and was in a different industry, which I liked very much, actually, but went back to graduate school, was in public administration, and did an internship. And Brooke, I had known her for a long time, and I went to Elihu's office and started doing an internship in her department. And really, for me, that was the moment I knew I wanted to be at Oakland. It wasn't necessarily that I wanted to lead, I just knew I wanted to be here. And that was really about 30 some odd years ago. And so that's sort of the trajectory that took me, and I really haven't left. And I always say I can't seem to get employed outside of a mile radius of City Hall. But it's been great, and I think through that, as the mayor mentioned, interestingly enough, through that process for me is where I actually found my voice and figured out how to be a woman leader actually in this city. So that's how I got here.
Sorry, I have a little bit of a bad hip, so getting up and down is a little tough for me, but I'm gonna power through. Hang on to the mic, because what you just said leads me very beautifully into my next question, which is that I'd like to talk a little bit about mentorship and sort of who mentored you along the way. You can even name guys if you want, but who are the people where without their support, your forward motion wouldn't have had the speed that it's had? Oh,
that's a great question. I mean, I think it's standing up again. I think it's, for me, sort of personal and professional a little bit. Brooke, certainly in Oakland, coming here was a great leader. She actually helped me find the job after I worked for her. Thank you. Have I thanked you for that, by the way? I just want to make sure I've thanked you for that. And then actually a series of women who were involved either in the chamber and or elected officials. But weirdly enough, the person that comes to mind is really my grandmother. I don't know why, but she's the first person that came to my mind when you asked that question. I think she taught me a lot about empathy and kindness and generosity and what it was like to be human and a woman. And for me, those are the things that I think actually women have to kind of lean into as leaders. And so I think she probably was one of the most defining parts of my sort of maturity, I guess. She's passed away, obviously, but I hope she'd be proud.
Do you mind passing your mic to the mayor? Same question.
Yes, two people. So my mother, of course, she didn't know how to drive, didn't know how to speak English, again, illiterate, she didn't know how to read the language as well too, whether it was Hmong or English, but she was a fighter, and she's barely like maybe 4'10", and she's always been a fighter. You know, she fought for everything. She escaped genocide with 2 babies, infant babies. Saw a lot of death on her way, you know, and through those lens, you know, she taught me how to actually fight. A lot of times she and I were the ones fighting each other growing up. And, you know, but I get my fire from her. And in regards to getting into politics, truly, it's Amy Allison, if I can be honest. Amy Allison, she is the founder of She the People. And before she was the founder of She the People, we met on a local campaign, and I felt like I was a nobody, right? I was this kid, an intern from UC Berkeley, and here I am getting into this thing called campaigning for local politics. And there was a group of people, and you know, the whole campaign team, they were eating dinner, and she saw me in the restaurant, and I was just an intern, but I had finished my shift, and I was getting some food to go, and she invited me to sit at the table. And I said, okay. I was really nervous, and they were talking all about strategy and all this stuff that I could not even comprehend. And I was just sitting there quietly listening, and then she asked a question. And now I know it was like a softball question, right? It was like a really easy answer type of thing. And she asked a question, paused, turned to me and said, Sheng, what do you think? And in that moment, I felt so seen. I felt seen. I felt important. And I felt part of a team that, you know, I'm in this space, this privileged space of talking about running local campaigns. And this woman in just that moment, with just that question, that easy question that I was able to actually answer so I could feel like I'm adding something to the conversation, made me feel seen. And so I will always remember that moment. And that was the journey, that was like one of the very moments of me beginning my charge as a young woman to really say, you know, to really feel comfortable in my skin. And so, you know, and that's what I want to give back to young people as well too, is the moment, that special moment of being seen.
So I'm gonna also talk about my grandmother, Barbara. My grandmother was one of the first Latinas who was elected to the Berkeley School Board in 1988, which was amazing. Yeah. Unfortunately, she was planning to be here, and unfortunately the weather prevented her from coming. But I learned just about everything that I know about being an elected official, being a woman leader, and a woman of color in her places from her. She was a trailblazer. She was one of the first, I think the first ethnic studies program that was developed for K-12 in the country. And so she's still with us, she's still very active. She's retired from the state Board of Education, and so she continued to inspire me with her activism, even in her retirement. I think she's more busy now than she was when she was retired, or when she was working. So she does continue to be an inspiration for me and for my sisters as well. And then the other person that came to mind, I went to a community college, I went to Merced College, which is in North Central Valley. I had a teacher who really saw me in class and called on me a lot. I was very quiet back then. I did all my homework, but I was very quiet when I speak up. And so she encouraged me to really find my own voice and to be an activist with my fellow students. We advocated pretty heavily at our community college to keep UC courses from being cut. At the time, it prevented us from transferring to UC where courses were cut. And so she really taught me that. She taught me that I was important, that I could be a leader even in a small class of 5 people. And so I've sadly lost touch with her. I've been trying to get back in touch with her, but she was the person who really saw me at a very, very young age and really encouraged me to use my voice. Hang on to it.
So, I want to switch gears a little bit and speak more specifically to gender, even though you all have sort of talked about it, especially when you're talking about feeling seen, which is something that I feel that most men don't even need to worry about. But I want to talk about gender-based stereotypes that I am sure all of you have faced, throughout your career. And I am assuming that all 3 of you have challenged them because you're here with us today. So I want to hear a little more about a very specific gender-based challenge that you experience, how you surmounted it, and how you're applying that experience to what you do now.
So when I ran for city council in 2018, I had this huge question upon how do I get the voters to get to know who I am? And a part of getting to know who I am is what I've gone through. And part of what I've gone through, as you've heard, is that I am a domestic violence survivor, right? And the person who was hurting me was actually my son's father. So really, having those hard conversations with my family about one day my son's going to read about this and he's going to read about what his father has done. Is this something I want to do? Well, ultimately, it was a very hard decision. And I truly believe that other people would appreciate, and not just appreciate, but it may help someone else if I did speak about my truth. And so I did. I talked about how I'm a domestic violence survivor. It was on my website. And you do not understand how many men have come up to me to say, you have to take that down. You should take that down because that just looks like you're begging for attention. Because that looks like you're just, you're a victim and it makes you look weak. So many men, just men, not one woman, right? And my approach to that was, I'm sorry you feel that way, please don't vote for me. And my consultant had other feelings about how I was approaching this, but I truly felt, yes, right?
Okay, quick follow-up question. What does that mean?
Well, that meant you're supposed to get as many votes as possible, right? Not at the cost of my values, not at the cost of you being a jerk. This is my story. Did you think I raised my hand and said, yes, beat me up? Absolutely not. And so because of that, I doubled down. And I told my story over and over and over. And I can tell you that for every single man that came up to me to tell me to take that fact about what I went through down, I had triple the amount of women that came to me to say, I'm going through it right now. I've gone through it. Thank you, because now I see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you that this does not identify who you are, but you are so successful and powerful and an inspiration. And for me, that's what it's about. That is what it's about, and that is how you become to love yourself, because we don't, there's no situation where you're like, oh yeah, I chose to be in this abusive relationship. That is not actually true. With my rebellious attitude, you think that that's true, right? I'm a fighter. And so at the end of the day, I tell my story because anybody can end up in a precarious situation like that. And that was very empowering to continue to tell my story. And it's healing as well too. And it heals others. And it allows for others to tell their truth. And so that, that is a moment. It continues to be moments. I still get told that over and over. And so thank you for hearing the answer.
Sorry you have to follow that, Barbara, but I know you got a good story too.
Yeah, well, it's a little, yes. I'm just thinking back, there really isn't a time in I think any woman's life where they haven't experienced some gender-based,
challenges in any workplace.
Oh, if a woman says they haven't, that's a woman I
Right.
can't trust.
So I'm trying to sort of,
Pick one.
yeah. Well, what first came to mind is when you talk about your reaction or like how you respond. I mean, for me, the first thing I thought of is it kind of depends on the decade I'm in, right? I mean, when you're in your 20s, you're like, whatever, like and you have a different reaction. I think when you're, I'm not in my 20s anymore, and when you're older, you have the privilege of maybe dealing with it a little bit differently. It's not necessarily wrong or right or smarter or not as wise, but I have found that in my life I have dealt with that type of either microaggressions or just blatant, sort of sexism differently depending upon the decade I'm in. And where I am now, I think, well, first of all, the reason I was sort of stumbling there for a second is I was the first woman to be appointed to the Chambers as the Chamber CEO, and wait for it, it's 112-year history. So, it took the guys that long to figure it out. It wasn't gonna, blow up if they hired a woman. So immediately, and most of my professional life has been in the private sector, so I have always sort of had to emulate and sort of be, a man to some extent. I mean, for many of us who are of a certain age, do y'all remember the bow ties that we would wear to work, the silk bow ties? I have a bag of them somewhere in the house. I got to figure out if I can ever find them. But so you did sort of spend, like women had to sort of be like men. And I don't know when the moment was when that sort of transitioned, although I do remember when I first started working at the chamber in this role, and obviously I've had a lot of work life before that, but in this role, being very conscious of being in a room with mostly men, and that they were sort of telling me what to do. I had a lot of kiddos and a lot of those, and then some of them who are saying it to you, they're not really they don't think they're doing anything wrong. So like, how do you help educate these folks to be better allies, right? So how do you do that and not just be pissed off because they were assholes? I did have a guy tell me.
704, first swear.
Yeah. I did have a guy tell me, and actually many of us in this room know him. He's a developer in Oakland when I first got the job. He said, "You need to swear more." And I'm like, "Dude, that is not my problem." I absolutely know how to swear. I went to girls' boarding school. I know how to swear for sure. But I think the moment was it was about a year or two into the role at the chamber, and I was doing an event, and actually an ex-city council member came up to me. Many of us know her, in Washington, and she said to me, "There's the bar. I know." And I think it's just I had gotten comfortable enough in my role to just be myself. And then when she said that, it kind of just, it was this light bulb was like, oh yeah, like I can govern the way I want to govern. I don't have to do it like they did it. And like that, and then you just get to the point where you kind of don't care anymore either. There is that, So it's kind of all those things rolled up into one.
President Polk?
Tough acts to follow. The thing that came to mind the most, so I got elected in November of 2020, and I got elected at the same time as now Councilmember Kevin Jenkins. And one of the first things that I noticed was how people treated us differently. Kevin and I were born the same week, of the same year, of the same month, but he was treated very differently by my colleagues, by members of the community, and I could just tell the difference right away. The first assumption that most people make about me when I walk into our boardroom is that I'm a student trustee, not that I'm the president of the board. And so I'm not really hung up on titles. I still am very uncomfortable with being called president. I'm still leaning into that because I think as women we don't lean into that as much. Oh no, just call me Dyana. That's usually what I tell people. And so I'm still learning, and I have great examples with Barb and with Mayor Thao, with leaning into the leadership roles in a comfortable way as women, especially as women of color, and really calling out what the differences in the ways in which people treat us, especially as a new elected. So I'm still learning. I have, again, great examples, but that's been an ongoing issue that I feel myself dealing with. And so what I've done to try and push past that is mentor our two student trustees that we have at the Peralta Community College District. They're both women of color, which is really great. And so I've made it really a point to mentor them in a way to be able to handle that, because I should have been prepared for that a little bit more than I was. But it was just such a stark difference between how Kevin and I were treated, that I felt like the way that I could help combat that was to mentor the student trustees, and I'll continue to do that.
I look like I need a second mic. You all have set me up so well for my next question, and that is talking about how you all have developed your leadership style, especially when Barbara was talking about feeling like she had to be like a guy. I stopped listening to what everyone was saying and started thinking about some stuff that I had done early in my career where I felt like I had to guy it up. And I mean, just thinking about it right now, can you see me blushing? But so I want everyone to feel as bad as I do right now. And I would like all of you to talk about, no, it's all about torturing you just for this moment. I would like you to talk about something that you learned early on in your leadership career, a stumble you made when you were developing your style. And you don't have to like totally out yourself if it's something like too egregious, but how you learned from it and moved on. And since you have the mic, Madam President, you may start.
I think early, again, I think I'm going to probably go back to what I was talking about earlier in my career. I worked at the Green Lighting Institute, and it was a cold application. I did not realize that I was going to get the job. I worked with a man named Robert Canesta, and so I made a lot of mistakes in my early career. It was my very first job out of college, and so being the mentor that he was, he made very clear that I was making mistakes. And so I look back on that time as a really transformative time in my career, because making mistakes is how I learned. I learned a lot about politics from him. I learned a lot about housing. A lot of the early foundations of becoming a policy analyst, which is what my training is in, was because I made a lot of mistakes. I wrote the wrong policy memo, or something was late. It seemed trivial at the time, but it really taught me how to sharpen my skills as a policy analyst, and that's how I kind of realized that this is the avenue in which I wanted to go in. And so that's, at that point, I worked at the Green Lighting Institute with Bob for about 2.5 years, and then I moved on to get a policy degree from Post College. And so that's kind of what propelled me. And I just remember thinking every day, oh my God, I'm going to make another mistake and he's going to get mad at me again. But that really taught me. It taught me a lot that it was okay to make mistakes and just keep on, use it as a learning tool, and just keep moving.
Same question, huh?
Yeah, you can't get out of
No
this
surprises. No, I love this question actually, because you know, if you've never actually run for office, I encourage you to put yourself through hell, because you learn so much about yourself. And so this is going to be another 2018 story where I decide like, okay. So if you didn't know, I used to be a staffer for at-large council member Rebecca Kaplan. And so in 2018, when I decided that I would run, I decided that I would all of a sudden overnight turn into a politician. And I don't know what that meant, but for me, because, and it goes back to also why I ran, right? So for me, in my mind, being a politician is like you dress a certain way, you speak a certain way, you have certain jewelry, you know, and so that's what I did. It worked out for only a week. I knew I was not connecting with people, right? I was falling flat. I didn't like it. It was a chore to go out and talk to people when I love talking to people. And then when I did the one-on-ones, like, they were fabulous. So I was like, what's the difference? What's going on? Why can't I connect when I'm at the community forums in a big group? And obviously, for me, I already knew it was because I was trying too hard, trying to be someone I wasn't. And that's when I said to myself, and I had a real good talking to myself, like in the mirror, I was talking to myself. And I was like, look, stop, like, you're enough. Like, she cursed once, I'm gonna do it one time too. I was to make it, just to, so you don't feel bad. It's like, you've gone through way too much shit to even give it down if somebody would vote for you because they didn't like the way you spoke, or they didn't like the way you dress, or they didn't like what you were wearing, right? What kind of jewelry you were wearing or not wearing. I was like, if they're going to vote for me, they're going to vote for me because they know that I'm a fighter,
that I'm going to fight for them, that I'm going to be the best advocate because I've been an advocate my whole life. You know, that I am all about delivering service because that's who I am and that's what's in my heart. And so when I shifted over to being my true self and really delivering that heart message, that's when I started connecting. That's when I started feeling like, you know what? Maybe this is the right path for me. Because I did have that imposter syndrome of feeling like, what am I doing? People like me don't get elected, you know? If I were to get elected, I'd be like a Boris council member. Like, who does that, right? But that's wrong. You see, people like me should get elected because people like me govern differently. And I had to be okay with that. And I am so okay with that to this day. And I tell you, that's part of and I love talking about it because, you know, running for office is torturous, but it truly allowed for me to really love myself. Like, who could say that? Not a lot of people, is what I've noticed. I found out so much of what I will tolerate, what I will not tolerate, my worth, and that not every single vote that's cast, that the person's going to cast, you want, is the same thing with, with how you're getting paid, what kind of job you want, right? And how you're getting paid. Do I want to work for Chevron? No offense to anybody who works for Chevron, you know? And so anyway, that was a moment where it really, anyways, yes, it was a really proud moment in my life in regards to how I found myself.
Well, your earrings are great, so the jewelry thing worked out. Can pass me a card?
I have a bag of bow ties if you want to borrow them.
I think we figured out Halloween.
Yeah, I don't think I know how to wear them anymore. This is a really good question. I'm not quite sure I'm going to be able to answer it well, and I feel like I'm going to maybe commit sort of a cardinal sin in a room full of women, but I think it's important to acknowledge probably one of the most difficult jobs I had. I want to make sure everybody understands this was not Brooke. I just want to point this out. Was I worked for a woman, and she did not like me at all. And you know, I could sit here and try to unpack all day long why, because I'm not anybody not like me, but she didn't. And I think she was. I'm not going to say the job because there's a lot of people in this room who probably know this person and know the job. But it was a really good experience for me. I ended up leaving the job, and then I, made a couple of decisions which got me all the way back to City Hall and things that I'm really proud and happy that I've done. So at the end of the day, it worked out. But I left mostly because I kind of couldn't deal with the situation, and I feel badly because we're a room full of women, and we just talked about how we felt about being treated by men on occasion, but sometimes we also have to remind ourselves that women cannot be great to other women, and so it was a really good learning experience for me to make sure that I was not that kind of person, because you just can't do that. That goes back to grandma maybe, that you just can't do that. You have to treat people, and you have to help lift your peers, and the girls, and women who work for me and women I work with and near. I mean, I think that was a really good lesson for me, because and I think it took me a long time to figure out that it wasn't really me, it was her. Obviously it was her. It couldn't be me, but because I really tried. But it was a good lesson, and it's a good lesson as a sorry Viola. I told you I was going to try not to make jokes, but it was a really good lesson in leadership, because we have to be good bosses as women as well. And I work really hard. In fact, I have all women that work for me now. In fact, mostly I've had women that have worked for me. And I think it's really important to make sure we lift up our next generation of leaders. So.
It's fascinating because I think that so much of this is a generational thing too, because I think you and I, in a lot of ways when we were coming up, we experienced the sort of the crabs in the barrel thing. There can only be one woman at the table. And I'm just so happy for you two and for so many of you out there that you will not have to deal with being the only girl or feeling like, oh, there's two girls, one of them has to, catfight. It was not good. It was not good back then. So we're living in better times now, even though it doesn't always feel that way. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about Oakland, even though we've obviously been talking about Oakland all night long. One of the things that I think sets Oakland apart, even from San Francisco, where I will confess I live, and cities of the same sort of market size in the rest of the country, is its incredible, incredible diversity and multiculturalism. And with that comes a lot of disparate groups that are not linked. And even though the diversity and the multiculturalism is a beautiful thing, it also presents some very unique challenges for the three of you. So I'd like you to discuss how you embrace diversity and also how you work with the challenges that presents as unique to Oakland. You got the mic, Barbara, you can start. Yeah, go Barbara.
I think I might have forgot the question. No, so,
diversity, pros and cons.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things, I lived in San Francisco for a long time, as I said, as any self-respecting 20-year-old did in my generation. So I met my husband there, we first started living there and then got married, and I moved to Oakland. And it just felt right? And San Francisco was actually much different than it is now. It was much more diverse. We lived in a Mission. It was a much more diverse place than it is now. But when we got here and I started working here, it just felt right. And you almost can't kind of tell why it feels right right out of the gate, and then you sort of realize it's because there's this beautiful tapestry of people and history and culture and religion, and you didn't really get that. And for somebody like me, I'm a white woman who was raised in California and in the East Bay, and for me, it was really a wonderful experience to be able to live here and raise my children here. And it's really, like your point earlier about the things that we experience, even how we experience, gender equity, racial equity, and how we experienced it as children growing up, and then watching my children grow up here in Oakland. I'm so happy. They go back to our hometown, and whenever we leave, they're always like, oh, thank God we don't live there. They really are proud to have. They really are proud to be in Oakland for all those reasons. I think. Maybe as the evening progresses, we can talk. I think the racial dynamics here are tough. They can be hard, and they can be hard for a white woman who's been involved in pretty difficult and deep discussions around a whole bunch of issues in the political sphere in Oakland for the last 30 years. But you just have to sort of lean into your integrity and your life experience and I think it's interesting in an environment now that is really hyper-focused, really lean into the intention of what you're doing or watching somebody else doing, because a lot of people are making mistakes, but it isn't their intention. And I think we have to let our world be a little bit big so that we can help educate the people who maybe just aren't as self-actualized or just aren't ready yet. I don't see it as much in my children's generation, but clearly with my peer generation, people are all different, varying degrees of understanding around racial and equity and what that means. And I think we have to give people enough space to learn and to grow as well, right? So that's my life.
So it does set up for some challenges. However, I can tell you that I always say that Oakland's diversity, it's our strength. And we hear that time in and time in again. However, I can also tell you that Oakland, we are very unique in the sense that, so growing up in Stockton, California, there's diversity there. But do people hang out together and blend? They do not. Even within the API community, like I'm Southeast Asian, very different, right, than your East Asians or South Asians. Even within the API community is segregated. You don't hang out with other people who don't speak the same languages you do or have the same beliefs that you do. However, here in Oakland, we are so unique in the sense that we want to learn about different cultures. Because we love the diversity. We love the different tastes of food. And that is truly our superpower. I think that there's a huge difference in regards to socioeconomics here in the city of Oakland. And I think that that could be some of the driving force behind some of the tension that is actually happening, right? What does it mean to be able to live here and not just live but thrive here in the city of Oakland? What is affordability relative to the one person here to Barb relative to, Viola? It's different. It's huge gaps. And I think that that's what we're trying to solve for, right? To keep, to really keep Oakland's diversity. And so that is being intentional. When you talk about the intentionality, you talk about being intentional about let's identify which groups are living on the margins that have been here for generations, and how do we keep them here? And let's just say it, right? That's our Black community, our brown community, our indigenous community. And how do we ensure that they are put at the forefront so that we can continue to keep our strength, which is our diversity? And so that is how we are leading under this new administration. And truly not just talking about, we have the race and equity department, we're good, right? No, that's not enough. How are we translating that to how we show up to communities? How are we translating that on how we give out grant money and to whom we give grant monies to? And so these are the challenges that we see at City Hall. However, these challenges, I have a great team. I have a super duper great team that I'm so proud of, who does this love work with me. And we will always remind each other of how we show up, who we're being intentional about, and how we keep the diversity. So with this moment, I did want to introduce and just wave Deputy Mayor Dr. Kimberly Mayfield. And of course, Yuri Torres, who's a senior assistant in my office. And it's just not about the individual self. It's about the people that you bring along with you, right? Because we all have blinders in one shape or form or another. And we have to make sure, part of knowing thyself is knowing where your blinders are at and then feeling in those positions so that we are being extremely intentional when we talk about diversity and when we talk about how do we actually create the impacts that are needed to ensure that our Black communities are still able to live here, afford to live here, and buy homes here, and then be able to work here and play here. And then I dare say, be able to have thriving families here, right? And so that's the intentionality that the office leads with.
Thank you, Mayor. As I was listening to Barb and to Mayor Thao, I was thinking about, I keep going back to when I first got elected because that was such a pivotal time in my life. And so at the time of my election in November of 2020, there hadn't been a Latino student graduation at the Peralta community colleges. Each of the different colleges had some ceremony in some way in the past. And so when I first got elected, it was the day after I got sworn in, I got a call from some Latino. I interchanged using Latina, using Latinx, Latino, and Latina. So I will interchange with that because there's a lot I could say about it, but I won't at this time. Happy to talk about it later. I identify as Latina. And so the next day I got a call from some Latino administrator saying, we want to sit down and we want to talk about doing a Latinx student graduation. And that this means so much to our community that we've never had one of those as a district, right? And so we worked really hard. We worked really hard with the African American affinity groups because they had been having a graduation consistently for the last few years. And so we were able to really work together. The Latino community is the fastest growing student population within the Peralta colleges. And I think Oakland Unified, I believe that is very, very similar. So what happens at Oakland Unified is usually mirrored at the Peralta Community College District because of our overlap in terms of students graduating from Oakland Unified into Peralta. And so I've really leaned into that and working with the community within the Peralta District and with Oakland Unified. Just this past weekend, I attended, I believe it was the 23rd annual Latino Honor Roll.
And so even the diversity within our community, to your point, Mayor Thao, was we had folks who gave a blessing in Hmong, which is a Central American indigenous dialect. We had other countries other than Mexico, which a large population of our Latino community here is Mexican, but we also have a lot of immigrants from Central America and South America. And so to see that diversity just this past weekend was amazing to see, and to be in community together, and to see that we have other folks, other communities within our community who need that outreach, that need to be seen as well, that really deserve that representation. And so my work at the Peralta colleges has been focusing in on the Latino student population and their needs. The last piece of it is working with the Department of Education to make all of our students what we call Hispanic serving institutions. And so Laney College is our last holdout. We just got word just yesterday that we are going to be able to apply for that grant. So all 4 of the Peralta Community College districts will be Hispanic serving institutions, which means 25% minimum student population within each of the campuses is Latino. And so being able to get, yes, it's a big deal.
This is news.
It's a huge deal, yes. And it's something I'm really proud of as a Latina elected official representing the Peralta Community College District, to ensure that the diversity within our student population is seen. And I'm speaking specifically to the community that I am a part of, but I know that there are other affinity groups who are looking to us to see how we're going to move forward with that, because our student population should be served and deserve to be seen.
That's terrific. Breaking news tonight of this. This is exciting.
Yes.
So one of the other things that I believe makes Oakland unique among cities of our market size is the direct way that people offer criticism. I feel like in other cities of this size, you can go look at Nextdoor or something and, hear things indirectly, but my understanding is here people will run across the street against traffic to provide you criticism regarding how you're doing your job, what you're up to that day. So I'd like to ask each of you, and this is obviously very, you've got a brief window, but I bet you could still think of something, Mayor. What's the harshest criticism that you are sort of grappling with right now, and how do you turn it over in your head to make it into something constructive as opposed to something that turns over in your brain again and again at 2:30 when you wake up? Barbara, you want to start?
Oh, man.
Well, you have the most experience with criticism, I think.
Well, one time I was with Mayor Thao. It's figured. Okay, I gotta think about this because, you're right. It's interesting to represent. I represent a business organization in a very progressive city. You can imagine that is not easy every single day of the week, and we do get criticized. I think. Oh God, I could really go so many different ways with this. I think the thing that I'll talk about, if it's okay, and then you can tell me I was wrong, is the use of criticism in the political sphere.
I'm already into it.
Okay.
Go.
Okay. And I do, and you will completely relate. You'll understand this. Okay, so I represent a business organization. The businesses in Oakland are incredibly progressive, relatively speaking, but we are probably one of the most progressive cities in the country. So when I took the job, there was a gentleman who ran it before me. He'd run the organization for 17 years. He did not live in Oakland, and so I kind of didn't want the job at first, because I'm like, I don't want that job. I don't want to run a chamber. You immediately think, three white guys sitting around a table drinking martinis in the 1950s. That's what people think. And so it was really important to represent and run the organization. And then I realized, kind of early on, I got to run it and create an organization that I felt was really reflective of the community that we serve. And yet we still represent the business community. So oftentimes we are on the wrong side, let's say, of an issue. And I think criticism, when that happens, we tend to be, sometimes an issue, a policy issue, needs an enemy. You need an enemy to advocate for your beliefs. I'm not looking at the mayor right now. Although we can talk about Everyone. And so we have become sort of the ire of that a lot because, progressive, it's very hard to align progressive values and a business organization. And yet, I think that is actually being really short shrift to everybody involved because we're all progressives. We all chose to live here. We all want the same things for our city and for the people in our city. We just might have a teeny little bit different paths on how to get there, right? And so I think the criticism that we get, I really try to hear criticism if I think it's important for us to learn from. But if we're being the enemy, or just we also have to acknowledge that that's not something like we can't really change. We can't really change. What we really try to do is find that middle ground when we're dealing with policy issues, and we've done a lot of that. I think. Yet we'll always sort of sometimes be criticized. Sometimes we're criticized because we're the organization that represents big business. I hate to break it to everybody, but 60% of the jobs that are created in the city are created by businesses that have 50 people or over. So there's and I always talk about the ecosystem. We really have to think more holistically as a community about how we solve these pressing issues that we have. Because if not, we will emulate and perpetuate the nonsense that we see at the federal level, and we don't want to do that here in Oakland, right? So yeah, we just can't. We're already freaked out and horrified about 2024. I don't know if anybody else is. Oh my God! But so I think we need to take our lessons, and learn from the folks that are not doing it right and do it better. And actually, in the 30 years I've been here, I do think the city has the ability to really do that, and there's been a lot of occasions where we have done that. So, I think sometimes the criticism is good. It helps us grow, and yet we also acknowledge that people just really need to come together and work together.
This is why Barb and I, we get along so well. We both talk about ecosystem. I understand that it is an ecosystem here in the city of Oakland. It is also equally important, I must say, who delivers the message as well, too. But in regards to criticism, as a politician, I hate that word, but it's okay.
You better get used to it, man.
I know. As a politician, it's very interesting, right? Because I'm all about criticism, right? I think that we can always be a better version of government or ourselves, or I'm always open to criticism. However, it's a hard stop. It's a hard stop when you're threatening my life, or my family's life, or my staffers' lives. That's a hard stop. And I think that in the moment in time that we're in right now, even here in progressive Oakland, I am seeing personally, and I don't know if this is like a new thing or what have you. It probably isn't. I should ask Mayor Schaff about this. But it definitely is a new thing, whereas when I was a council member, I didn't actually see all of these attacks on elected officials' lives. And now, social media has actually allowed for people to be so brave and be so who they really are. And it's people who live in our progressive city who are saying, wait till you feel the Second Amendment. How am I supposed to take that? How am I supposed to take that? I have a son. I have a daughter. I have a family to get back to. We may not agree, but it is never okay to speak in that way to anybody. And thank you. And I believe that that's cowardly, what you're doing. We can have a discourse using our words. Our mom and grandmas had taught us that. But to go out there and think that you're criticizing someone by threatening their lives or their well-being or their family's well-being, or to say okay, let's all just, march upon this home, at whatever hour, and, go and what they did to Mayor Libby Schaff's house, that was disgusting. When they went and tagged her home, she has 2 kids there. Her son is the same age as my son. They went to school together. That just crosses the line, in my opinion. I mean, it's free speech and all of that. It's fine, but at a reasonable hour, please. And not just that, but do not threaten anyone's life, because I take that really seriously. How I grew up, where I grew up, when your life is being threatened verbally, oh, that you should take that seriously, and you better watch your back. And so I think that that's where where it's really difficult. Because I could take on all the critiques, because of course I'm still learning and I'm still growing, but when you cross that line, it's hard. And and I know a couple of council members on the Oakland City Council who wants to quit because their lives have been threatened. So if you haven't heard about that, you should all know that people are serious when it comes to our lives and what we are doing in the city of Oakland. Again, whether you like it or not, there's an adult way to go about it. And threatening people, and not just threatening people, but their lives and their families' lives, that is never okay.
I'll admit, when I first got elected, getting criticized was hard to hear. We had, at the time, I think, so I got sworn in my bedroom because I got elected in the middle of our global pandemic. And so I think a lot of times having our meetings online empowered people to be nastier than they probably normally would have been in our public comment. And so we got some people, I remember my first meeting coming into public comment and saying some really terrible things. And I really do believe in free speech, and I know that public comment is great, but it took some getting used to, and it was a little bit, it's hard to this day. It's hard for me to hear criticisms in any medium, public comment, whether it be public comment or people saying things about us. And as elected officials, I think a lot of us retreat into, okay, this is just how it has to be. People can say and do whatever they want. We can't say anything. The Peralta Community College District has gone through a lot of issues over the last few years. I think a lot of people have been made aware of that. And so the latest critique that we've been getting is around our enrollment numbers. And so we've gotten a lot of people coming into public comment. I've gotten people calling me, emailing me, constituency groups on our campuses, community members who are concerned. And I think that it's a concern for everybody. Once our enrollment numbers are down, that means that our funding gets cut. I mean, there's it's a domino effect as to when our students are not enrolling, or students are not enrolling into the community college system. And I think what I've been trying to do with the critiques that we've been receiving, and especially now as a newly elected president of the board, is to try to do what I can to work with our constituency groups to try and find solutions. Because for me, it's easy to complain about something or to say, oh, that's what's going wrong. This is going wrong right now. But to ask them, so what do you think we should do? So a lot of times what I do, I can't obviously do that in public comment, but when people email me or people call me or text me to talk about any issues on our campuses, I say, well, what do you think we should do? What do you think I should do as the board president? What do you think I should do as an elected trustee? What would be a solution that you would think would work? And so I try to use that as an opportunity and to flip it into a conversation, a constructive conversation about what we can do about enrollment, what we can do about safety, what we can do about financial aid and increasing funding for our campuses, what we can do with working with labor partners into getting more CTE classes at Community College. These are all things that are really important to me. And so, again, and because they're important, I also get critiqued on them. So I try to use it as an opportunity and welcome any conversation about how we can do things better at Peralta, because when our students succeed, we all succeed.
Hang on to that mic, because you were leading into my next question, which, since everything's written in huge old lady type, you probably knew already. Sorry, my eyes are terrible. But one of the things you mentioned, working with constituency groups, and one of the things that I think it's really important to all of us here tonight is to understand how you and your office intends in 2023, leading up to 2024, which I think you're not the only person freaked out about. How you intend to work with advocacy groups like the League, like other groups. So what's your game plan going into the rest of the year in terms of working with advocacy groups, and how can we as advocates work best with you?
Sure. So like I mentioned, I was elected in my bedroom on Zoom, and so the only medium at the time by which I could speak with constituents was via Twitter. And so that was the easiest way for me to get a hold of students. Students would inbox me and ask me questions. I pride myself on being incredibly accessible as a trustee. I think that was
to go back to criticism, that was a criticism of several of the trustees in the past who did not really talk to folks. They didn't really go out into the community. And so I've made a really conscious effort with my office for the last couple of years, and I plan to do that as I run for my re-election in 24, which is why I am freaked out a little bit, is to make sure that I'm meeting with everybody. I have standing meetings with our labor partners. We have 3 major labor partners on our campuses. I meet with them at least on a monthly basis. I have open office hours. So once or twice a month, I'm at a cafe outside talking to, and I have people come. People show up. I have students who come. I have administrators who want to talk about stuff. I have faculty members who come by. And so I really do pride myself on being accessible. As elected officials, we're public officials. We serve the community that elected us. And so I take that very seriously. And I make it a real conscious effort on my part to meet with everybody who wants to talk, who wants to give us solutions, who wants to make our colleges into the colleges that we know that they can be, and to really look at how we can uniquely solve the issue of our enrollment. That's the number one issue that our colleges are facing. And so coming up with creative solutions, and I think the only way to do that is through community. And so I will continue to do that, to talk to anybody who wants to do that.
And Mayor Thao, how about you? How are you with advocacy groups, and what's the plan? Yes, this is the plan, you guys. I love working with advocacy groups, and I worked with advocacy groups while I was a council member, representing District 4. This is a whole different kind of arena now that we are representing the whole city, but I want to meet with you all. I want to be thought partners. I do believe that this is an ecosystem, and I don't know if you know, but under this administration, our mantra is One Oakland, right? Yes, Barb uses it too over at the chamber, because we are One Oakland. We all need each other, you know, in order to actually get things done. Government, we can't take care of every single thing, no. But what we can do is empower our communities. And what does that mean? That means that, yes, the mayor's office and city staffers, I want to help educate the community on how to get civically engaged. How do you adopt a spot, right, Brooke? How do you put together and adopt a sewage drain? But because government doesn't work without empowering the community. And again, it's all interconnected, because when you empower the community and you get community together to talk, to actually break bread and create relationships, that's public safety. Now you are, unbeknownst to yourselves, probably are helping now OPD, right? Because our public safety, that will allow for you to know your neighbors. And so it's everything is interconnected. And so the way that I want to work with the different community groups is through my staff, creating those meetings with myself. You may not always get me, but my staff and I, we are all very tight. They debrief me on a daily around who they're meeting, which community groups they're meeting with, how can I show up, and how can we support with the great work of different community groups. And so if you want to have that meeting with me, you want to get a hold of Yuri and Dr. Mayfield, and not just that, but we have an online page where you can fill out a scheduling request so that you don't have to shoot off that email and think it went out to nowhere, because I look through that list of scheduling requests myself once a week, and I go over it with my executive assistant, to see who can take what meetings. Because it's incredibly important that we, and that's why the diversity is reflected in my office as well. So Yuri comes from the faith-based community. She was a part of Faith in Action. We know that we have the most religious institutions west of the Mississippi here in the city of Oakland. And so that's incredibly important, right? And so really being intentional about who is in the office so that people feel welcome to, first of all, the very first step is diversity in the office, so people feel welcome to actually connect with us, right? So we have a liaison who speaks Spanish as well too, right? We have a liaison who speaks Cantonese. And so that's the first step in this office. And more so than that, please reach out to us. I've gone to my first neighborhood association, right? These are smaller meetings. Imagine if I had to do those across the whole city. But I think that they're very important. Especially being a new mayor, it's important to really hear what the community has to say, what they care about. I think we all care about homelessness, public safety, and affordable housing. right? Those are
And keeping our data safe. We're concerned about data breaches too.
Oh yes, and data breaches. I can tell you, you know what's really hard about this job that I have learned is that with all the bad news that you hear, there is so much great news that I cannot tell you. So much great news that I cannot tell you, that I can't share with you.
But why not? Why not?
Because it's a security issue. It's still under investigation. I'm just going to say it like that. But just know that the staff at City Hall, we have amazing staff, bright staff. And yes, the breach happened. It happened because we neglected the system for decades. It's not about the last administration. It's about many administrations, let's be clear. And so now it's shown out of our front door. But again, with all of the negative things that you have heard coming from City Hall, there are so many great things that we just can't discuss publicly. And so I'll end on that note. Thank you. Okay, just tell me. Okay, what happened was,
Are you sure you want to be in the chamber? You just want to like head to Vegas and start a stand-up act? You can make so much more money.
I know. Really?
I've watched Hacks. Have you watched Hacks? She's super rich.
Yeah. It's funny because we should add that humor is a really important tool, I think, for anybody, women or men, to use when appropriate. So we did that this evening. I did forget the question because I wanted to tell you this.
Oh, the question?
Oh
my God, I already forgot.
No, I do remember now. I do remember now.
Oh, working with advocacy groups.
I remember now. So I don't think there is any benefit for organizations to live and only converse with their sort of echo chamber organizations, right? I mean, really? I mean, have we not learned anything, right? So one of the things that I think is really important, and certainly when I got to the chamber 9 years ago, is to really communicate with really every constituency possible in Oakland. And for many of you who have been around Oakland for a long time and know us and know the chamber, you know we actually really do that every day, because you're never going to make good policy. You're never going to recommend good. You're never going to advocate for things that are important to the community if you don't have an understanding of everybody's perspective. And so this idea that I was talking about earlier about when you're in a policy battle, and it has happened, on a piece of legislation or on something that really is important to the community. Usually, it was funny. I was thinking about this morning. That maybe this question will come up. You know the song "You Can't Always Get What You Want." I was thinking about business tax, actually. But sorry for those of you who followed that 2-year odyssey that we had. But if you think about the words in that song, if you try sometime, you get what you need. I mean, it is a really good lesson in working together towards a solution. You're not always going to get everything you want, and yet there's a constituency that is yelling at the tops of their lungs for what they believe in, exactly as loud as you are for what you believe in, and somewhere in the middle, there's probably some relatively good policy in the middle of that. And so I think we really try. We have tremendous connections across the city. We pretty much know everybody, at least in our organization. Somebody knows almost every organization and every advocacy group, and we really work hard to make sure we're not just speaking for the business community, but we are speaking for all of the community, because in fact we need everybody to be successful for the city to thrive, to generate the revenue that then they get to spend, right? On the services, it's true, on the services that we really care about. So, and then we want to advocate for those services as well. So I think it's one of the things that we've done really well at the chamber. And we have to continue to do it every day because, things change and policies change and people's attitudes change. But it is something we really, it's a core principle of ours to make sure that we are really listening. And it doesn't mean you don't disagree, and it doesn't mean you don't disagree, aggressively sometimes, as we all know that. But at the end of the day, if everybody's not super happy, it's usually a good place to be. It's strange, but we're a policy.
Oh no, dude, I'm a journalist. If everybody likes your story, you didn't do a good job. I hear you completely. I feel like we've, even though, we've covered some heavy stuff, and I feel like we've talked really seriously, so I want to end on sort of a fluffier, funner note, just so we can all go home and, and mull this over. So what I want to ask everyone, and Madam Mayor, you cannot say you can't tell us, what is your leadership superpower? And part B, what leadership superpower do you wish you had? And no, infinite funds is not a superpower. Contrary to what Bruce Wayne would have you believe, it's not a superpower. So what is your leadership superpower, and what superpower do you wish you had leadership-wise?
My leadership superpower is bringing people together, right, Barb? So what Barb was alluding to earlier about the business taxes, for the first time ever, I was able to bring in the big chambers, the smaller chambers, and labor unions into the same room so that we can agree on one business tax. They were not happy, none of them. That means I did a job, right? And so we got that one business tax, and I still hear crying about it every so often. But it happened, not from you, but it happened. And so really bringing people together is something that I consider my superpower. I'm having really great conversations with the county to start on a new slate so we can have better partnerships, right? And so that's my superpower. What I wish my superpower could also be is not having to sleep. Not having to sleep so then, you can work around the clock, because there's never enough hours in a day to actually do all the things that we need to get done here in the city of Oakland. Why do you laugh?
It's kind of dysfunctional. I mean, that's what you want, but I completely relate.
The only reason I'm laughing is because by the time you get to my age, you won't sleep anyway, so it won't matter.
You're answering next. No.
I'm sorry, I wake up a lot in the middle of the night, so I just look at that to look forward to. Well, I think humor might be a little bit of my superpower in being able to disarm a room. I think that's an important tool to have, particularly as a woman, but you have to really walk delicately through that, because at one moment you cannot be taken seriously. So it is something that you have to learn and calibrate to make sure that all of a sudden you're not like, oh, look, she's a funny girl over there, right? Like, because funny doesn't mean you're not powerful. It just means you can disarm a room and get what you want. So, but, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, I'm just saying. And then my superpower I wish I had, it would be a lot easier if I could be a mind reader, for sure, 100%.
Oh, are you sure you want that?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, if I could turn it on and off, yes. How about that? Yeah. So it's funny that you asked this, because I was just talking about this to some of my colleagues the other day. So the superpower that I have that I think is actually a family trait is that we notice everything. We notice people's body language. We notice what people are wearing. We notice just everything about people. And so it's really helped me, because when you're up on the dais, sometimes you gotta make a decision fast. And so you have your ability, my also my superpower, to really read a room quickly and well is really helpful. The superpower that I wish I had, I wish I could be in two places at once. One being on a beach in Baja, the other one being on the dais. So I wish I could do that, but maybe someday we'll figure out how to do it. Thank you. Keep trying to hand Eve my...
No, it's because you know I'm hungry for it. I wish my superpower were control of all of you. I want to thank you all again for coming out tonight and talking to us. I want to thank you all again for coming out and giving really good energy to us here too. I know that all of these folks would love to hear from you one way or another, and I don't know how that is. There are many ways to find these people and contact them, as you all know already. So I know that I didn't ask all of the questions that we had because, life is short. But I encourage you to reach out to these folks who represent you and these people who make the money for the folks who represent you, and ask them the questions that you wish that I had asked. So thank you all again for coming tonight. Thank you folks again for coming tonight.
Hello. A round of applause for all of them. Special guests. There are many people to thank. I thank our moderator, our panelists, all of you in attendance for weathering the climate and joining us this evening. And as we close, the League of Women Voters was formed initially to help women educate themselves about issues because men told us there was no point to grant us the right to vote, that we would probably vote like the way our husbands would vote, or our fathers or our brothers. And we decided then and there that we were going to educate ourselves regarding issues. That was over 100 years ago, and we haven't stopped. So, many of us have joined the League because as we look across the country, there seem to have few institutions that support nonpartisanship, or where we still believe that we can have constructive dialogue in a room or different perspectives with respect for one and all. I look at these public meetings where the loudest people show up and often not all views are shared. In that spirit, the League of Women Voters looks to improve how it reaches out to all of you in the community, how it shows up to support issues, and how it can improve its communications to better serve Oakland. Join us in our work. Help us improve what we do. We will be appointing a new supervisor this week. It's unclear how we are filling out the position of school board member for District 5. Many argue that not enough of us know what the Board of Supervisors does or does not do. There will begin, again, a lot of excitement about what's happening in the national scene with the March primary coming up, but there are few issues that don't start locally. All politics is local. Thank you so much. Join us.